the Bhagavad Gita, chapter um, Hare Krishna. Sorry, Prabhuji, I think I touched the wrong option when it's asking live, is going live. So that's why it's happened. So yeah, so we will read from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse number 36, where Arjun is asking this um, about this situation that he's facing. So I'll recite the verse and then I will read the translation and little purport. So verse number 36. Arjuna vacha atkena prayukto ayam papam charati purushaha anichannapi vashneya baladiva niyojitaha. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vishnu, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? So here Arjuna is asking that what is it that impelling us or forcing us to do these sinful activities? So I'll just read a paragraph of purport. A living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme is originally spiritual, pure and free from all material contamination. Therefore, by nature, he is not subject to the sins of the material world. But when he is in contact with the material nature, he acts in many sinful ways without hesitation, and sometimes even against his will. As such, Arjuna's question to Krishna is very sanguine as to the perverted nature of the living entities. Although the living entity sometimes does not want to act in sin, he is still forced to act. Sinful actions are not, however, impelled by the supersoul within, but are due to another cause, as the Lord explains in the next verse. Jai. So, so this is the genuine inquiry. So this is the genuine inquiry that sometimes we are impelled to do sinful activities, even unwillingly. For example, we follow regulative principles, but generally people don't care about regulation and act on sense gratification platform. Some people say they want to quit drinking or meat eating or other bad habits, but they feel helpless and unwillingly carry on the habits like something engaging them by force. So this impelling that we need to understand and the root cause of it. So in next 7 verses, Lord Krishna explains the root cause of this problem and solution. So let's see the next verse. I'll just quickly read the verse in translation. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Kama Esha Krodhesha Rajoguna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapapama Vidhainam Iha Varinam. So the word here is the Varinam. So translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath. and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So Srila Prabhupada says in his purport that when a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. Or, in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust. As milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. So here we can understand that lust is the biggest enemy, which is the cause of our entanglement in this world. Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport that when mode of passion degrades into a mode of ignorance, it becomes wrath. But instead of this, if we elevate ourselves to mode of goodness, then we can be saved from this lust and wrath. So this lust is the misuse of our free will, because Lord given us, all of us have a free will. So desire to enjoy senses and false ego. This is lust, and lust got different parts also. And most obvious is like attraction for opposite sex or sex life. That is just a one part of it. Lust is much deeper. So like thinking like that, I'm the center of the world, I'm the enjoyer, and putting myself in center all the time. So actually this is this propensity is impelling us to do things that are sinful. So there is an example, Prabhupada also given Hanuman's example, Ravan and Hanuman, because Ravan used his lust to abduct Mother Sita and his wrath for so many sinful activities. But in opposite to that, Hanuman is a very big devotee of the Lord Ram and Sita. He transformed his lust to the love of Godhead, and he used his wrath to burn the city of Ravan, Lanka. So, so this is the example that how we can use it, because ultimately everything is coming from Krishna. So now, how to elevate ourselves to mode of goodness if we taken over by lust? Srila Prabhupada gives the hint that by spiritual attachment, by following prescribed process. But let's see in the next verse what Lord Krishna is telling. Verse number 38. Dhumena vriyate vahani yathardrso malena cha yathol balena avrato grahas tatha tendena avratam. Translation. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. So, Srila Prabhupada explained these 3 degrees of lust, because in this verse, Lord Krishna explaining is giving 3 analogies, like embryo covered by the womb. This stage of living condition can be compared to that of the trees. And the trees are also living entities, but they have been put in such condition of life by such a great exhibition of lust that they are almost void of all consciousness. The covered mirror is compared to the birds and beasts, and the smoke-covered fire is compared to human being. In the form of a human being, the living entity may revive a little Krishna consciousness. So, in the human form, we have this great chance that we can cultivate Krishna consciousness and get rid of this lust. And when we start onto this path, so these 3 analogies illustrated by 3 stages, like the first is the smoke covers the fire as a neophyte stage in Krishna consciousness. Then by chanting process, the dust on mirror gets cleansed. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said in his Sikshastakam, Cheto Darpana Marjana. And then embryo covered by the womb shows the helplessness position that we 100% surrender to the Lord. But these are the 3 degrees of the lust. And what are the characteristics of this lust? Because when we are fighting with some enemy, we need to know how it behaves and where it resides, or how we're going to fight with it. So Lord Krishna talking about these characteristics in the next verse, verse number 39. Avritam jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kamarupena konteya duspurenan nanalena cha. Translation. Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So it burns like fire. And the word here is also Nitya Varina, means it's an eternal enemy. So I'll just read a paragraph of Srila Prabhupada's purport. It is said in Manusmriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment. Just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel, in the material world, the center of all activities is sex. And thus, this material world is called Mathunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of the material existence of a living entity. Therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance, by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually, that so called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. So, this is the main characteristic of lust, that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment. We also face that in our lives, that we gratify our senses, but senses are not satisfied. And there are a number of ways to gratify senses. Modern civilization is centered on sense gratification. Newspaper, TV, internet, clubs, etc. Everywhere there are these shackles of sex life. This point actually is described in Srimad Bhāgavatam, Canto 7, chapter 9, verse 45, where Prahlad Maharaj telling this point. I'll just recite this verse. Yanmaithunadigrihmedi sukham hitucham kandu yanena karayoriva dukkha dukkham tripyanti neha kripana bahu dukkha bhaja kandu tivanam manasijam visaheta dhiraha. So, translation like that. Sex life is compared to the rubbing of 2 hands to relieve an itch. Grimedis, so-called grahastas, who have no spiritual knowledge, think that this itching is the greatest platform of happiness, although actually it is a source of distress. The Kripanas, the fools, who are just the opposite of Brahmanas, are not satisfied by repeated sensuous enjoyment. Those who are dhira, however, who are sober and who tolerate this itching, are not subjected to the sufferings of fools and rascals. Okay, so in this verse, we can understand that Prahlad Maharaj talks about this sex life as like a itching. We have itch sometimes on our skin, and the more we scratch it, the more it get aggravated. So, but toleration here is the key. If we tolerate that itching, then we will be saved. Or, or as a dhira person, a sober person, do it. I'll just read one paragraph of purport. It is relevant here. Materialists think that sexual indulgence is the greatest happiness in this material world, and therefore they make elaborate plans to satisfy their senses, especially the genitals. This is generally found everywhere, and specifically found in the Western world, where there are regular arrangements to satisfy sex life in different ways. Actually, however, this has not made anyone happy. Even the hippies who have given up all the materialistic comforts of their fathers and grandfathers cannot give up the sensational happiness of sex life. Such persons are described here as kripanas or misers. The human form of life is a great asset, for in this life one can fulfill the goal of existence. Unfortunately, however, because of a lack of education and culture, people are victimized by the false happiness of sex life. And Prahlad Maharaj therefore advises one not to be misled by this civilization of sense gratification, and especially not by sex life. Rather, one should be sober, avoid sense gratification, and be Krishna conscious. The lusty person who is compared to a foolish miser never gets happiness by sense gratification. The influence of material nature is very difficult to surpass. But as stated by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 14, Mam eva ye prapadyante, mayam etam tarantite. If one voluntarily submits to the lotus feet of Krishna, he can be saved very easily. Yeah. So this point is clear now that we cannot satisfy lust by sense enjoyment. Some people think that if we enjoy senses, then our senses will satisfy. Sambhog se samadhi. This is all bogus philosophy, because bogus guru says this and blind followers follows it. Because this is what conditioned mind wants. Conditioned mind doesn't want to hear why you saying not to gratify my senses. If we analyze the situation carefully, even material perspective, excess of anything without regulation is injurious to health. So this is our biggest enemy, and problem is called Nitya Vairina. This lust is killing us. But there is another argument that this lust will go away by the age. Lust is the problem only for the youth. You need to gratify. But when you are growing old and senses are weak, then the lust will go away. But this argument is not right either. There are so many examples, and nowadays the degradation has no level. You will hear that old man getting caught with young girls and children. So actually lust going to trouble more when you are old, because your senses are weak, but propensity to is strong inside and finds perverted ways to come out. So this is a very big enemy of. So if we keep putting fuel to fire, it will increase only. We need to stop the fuel to reduce the fire. So recently I have attended a course. It's called fire control course at my workplace. And they were explaining there is a triangle of fire, like three things to create fire. And if you control one of that, you will extinguish fire. Like there is a conducive environment and like oxygen. source of ignition and a fuel. So one of that, if you break it, then it will extinguish. So here, like we cannot change the social situation or internet or something like that, but we can regulate our senses. Means we can stop fueling the fire. Now, this Nitya Varina, we want to control, then we need to find out where it resides, right? Because if we do not know that where is our enemy, then how we going to fight it? So in the next verse, Lord explaining the sitting places of this lust, as Srila Prabhupada calls these strategic position which are in the control of enemy. So I read the verse number 40. Indriyani manobuddhi asya uchyate aiter vimohayati esha jnanam avrati dehinam. Translation. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So there are these places, Lord explaining the senses, mind, and intelligence. So these three places, where these are very, as Srila Prabhupada is saying, that strategically important places where this lust resides, and we have to control it from there. So in a purport, I just read a paragraph. Srila Prabhupada said that the enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul, and therefore Lord Krishna is giving hints of these places so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all activities of the senses, and thus when we hear about sense objects, the mind generally becomes a reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter. And thus, with the mind and senses, the spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. Yeah. So here we see that senses, mind, and intelligence, how these are captured by lust, uh, that is our enemy. And this is the reason why we feel impelled and forced to do sinful activities, because we identify ourselves with matter. As a spirit soul, our constitutional position is eternal servant of the Lord. But because of false ego, we become addicted to enjoying the material senses, as mentioned by Srila Prabhupada. So intelligence plays a very big role also. And if we have strong spiritual intelligence, then we can say no to bad things. And if we have lusty intelligence, then it will drag us to fall down. For example, a bad conditioned mind will say, look, your friends enjoying and they are happy about it. But strong intelligence will be able to say no to bad environment. And that's where we need to fight our enemy of this important strategic position. We sing this prayer at the end of our programs, and it says like that, your friends might be lazy, but you think again, don't follow them, and you will win in the end. So Krishna gave us free will, and it's up to us how we use it. Because every moment we have to make choice, because every time we make choices. So is it, and we make choice that is it going to help me in my Krishna consciousness or not. The more we associate with devotees and read Srila Prabhupada's books, this will strengthen our intelligence. And the one we feed more will win, either lust intelligence or spiritual intelligence. If this intelligence position is strong, then even in provoking situations, we will be able to say no, because we will think of Srila Prabhupada is watching us, or Krishna is watching me, you know. So this is how we will strengthen this spiritual intelligence. And let's see the next verse where Krishna is explaining how to curb it. Tasmat tvam indriyani ado niyamya bharata sarva papamanam prajahi he hainam jnana vijnana nashanam. Translation. Therefore, O Arjun, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So here Krishna is giving the solution that at the very beginning we should regulate our senses and control this lust. And Prabhupada is saying that the Lord advises Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization and specific knowledge of the self. So from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. So here Srila Prabhupada mentioned this point. So sense regulation is the method to control this lust. So Srila Prabhupada gave us the process to follow, and regulative principles also needs to follow, by which we can regulate our senses. Now, we should follow this Krishna consciousness from the beginning. So what's the beginning means? Like when we are at the tender age. So there is a verse in Srimad Bhāgavatam where Prahlad Maharaj explains his very famous verse, Canto 7, Chapter 6, verse 1. Shri Prahladu Acha Komar Acharet Pragno Dharman Bhagavataniha Durlabham Manusam Janma Tadapi Adruvam Arthadam. Translation. Prahlad Maharaj said, one who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of body from the very beginning of life. In other words, from the tender age of childhood, to practice the activities of devotion service, giving up all other engagements. The human body is most rarely achieved, and although temporary like other bodies, it is meaningful because in human life one can perform devotion service. Even a slight amount of sincere devotion service can give us one complete perfection. So here, the early to start early in the age is very important. Prahlad Maharaj says that, and he says about the importance of this human birth, because only in this human life we can inquire. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Animals or trees, they can't inquire, but we can inquire: who am I? What I'm doing here? Why I'm suffering? But so that's why this human life is so important. And I'll just read a little purport because that is quite relevant. The whole purpose of Vedic civilization and of reading the Vedas is to attain the perfect stage of devotion service in the human form of life. According to Vedic system, therefore, from the very beginning of life, the brahmacharya system is introduced so that from one's very childhood, from the age of 5 years, one can practice modifying one's human activities so as to engage perfectly in devotion service. So here Prabhupada mentioned the brahmacharya system. You know, But nowadays, into current civilization or in current society, the whole Varna ashram system got destroyed, and nobody following that. So this brahmachari system is was there from childhood to student life, so we can gain the knowledge. So this the further Prabhupada say that as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 2.40, swalpam api asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhaya. Even a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Modern civilization, not referring to the verdicts of Vedic literature, is so cruel to the members of human society that instead of teaching children to become brahmacharis, it teaches mothers to kill their children even in the womb on the plea of curbing the increase of population. So Prabhupada said that it's very cruel in this current civilization. And if by chance a child is saved, he is educated only for sense gratification. Gradually, throughout the entire world, human society is losing interest in the perfection of life. Indeed, men are living like cats and dogs, spoiling the duration of their human lives by actually preparing to transmigrate again to the degraded species among the 8.4 million form of life. The Krishna conscious movement is anxious to serve human society by teaching people to perform devotion service, which can save a human being from being degraded again to animal life. As already stated by Prahlad Maharaj, Bhagavad Dharma consists of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. In all the schools, colleges, and universities, and at home, all children and youths should be taught to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, they should be taught to hear the instructions of Bhagavad Gita to put them into practice in their lives and thus to become strong in devotional service, free from fear of being degraded to animal life. The following Bhagavad Dharma has been made extremely easy in this age of Kali. The Shastra says, Hare Ram, Hare Ram eva kevalam, Kalau nasteva gatir anyatha. One need only chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Everyone engaged in the practice of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra will be completely cleansed from the core of his heart and be saved from the cycle of birth and death. Jai. So Srila Prabhupada mentioning here the importance of this education from the start. And so here we can see that the need of current time is to engage ourselves in Krishna conscious activities and from very early stage. But what about the older people? What about the people who passed this tender age? Is there any hope for them? Because they are already into this, they are already into the what you call pangs of this lust. So Srila Prabhupada says that also, that nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of God, the highest perfection stage of human life. So it's not that we have to only start with the tender age and when we passed it we can't do it. No, you can start any stage of life, provided you understand the urgency. Prabhupada used the word of urgency. So it's quite urgent, And once we understand this urgency, then we can nicely start whatever age we are. So this is the point that whenever we get the chance, we start this process, and by the causeless mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we will be saved. So these regulations called regulative principles of freedom. Now, this will liberate us. Like there is example like we follow the traffic rules and regulations, and we can drive freely without chaos. But if nobody follows these rules and regulations, the roads will be chaotic and dangerous. So rules and regulations actually give us the freedom and not to bind us. So that's why they are called the regulative principles of freedom. So let's see the next verse. Krishna is talking about the hierarchy of our body structure. So Hindriyani paraniyahu indriyebhya param manah manasastu para buddhi yo buddhi paratastu saha. Translation: the working senses are superior to dull matter, and mind is higher than the senses, and intelligence is still higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. So this is the hierarchy of our body. First is senses, then mind, then intelligence, and then soul. In previous verse, Krishna said to regulate the senses from beginning. But now we understand further that how lust works by senses. Srila Prabhupada says that in the purport that the senses are different outlets of for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it gives vent through the senses. Bodily action means the function of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as it does during dreaming. So this is the point to be understand here, that even if sitting in skilled place and doing meditation, stopping our working senses and bodily activities, but our mind will be active, and we cannot stop mind, as Arjuna talks about it in chapter 6, verse 34. Chanchalam hi manaha Krishna pramathi bal vadranam tasyaham nigraham manne vayorivad suduskaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, and obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the mind, but controlling the wind. So there is an example of Ajamil in Srimad Bhāgavatam. When he saw the lusty activity, and from outside he controlled his senses that very moment. But later he contemplated on that scene and fall down in the lusty trap and started the sinful activities or sinful life. This is actually mentioned in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 62, that Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha Sanghaste Supajayate Sanghat Sanjayate Kamaha Kamat Krodho Abhijayate. While contemplating on the objects of senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. That's what in this the second verse Lord Krishna saying, the lust and wrath, you know. So lust develops from the attachment. So Srila Prabhupada says in the last para of his purport, in saying that with intelligence one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the object of senses, but aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness by complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than a serpent with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind. Yeah. So this is the way to deal with it, this problem. And Krishna consciousness, which is a spiritual intelligence, will strengthen the mind, because we have to strengthen this with the association. Srila Prabhupada said the association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, not whimsically, like in Krishna. Okay, I'm associating with Krishna without understanding what is our position, what is our constitutional position, and what is Krishna's position. So that's why so many other sects or sahajiyas and all these things going on, because without understanding the real position. So let's see the next verse, the last verse. Evam buddhe param buddhava samsastabhiyatmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Translation. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, that is Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insistible enemy known as lust. So this is the conclusion what has been discussed in previous verses. Srila Prabhupada says in purport that in the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire, for dominating the resources of material nature, desire for overloading and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradual developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind. By steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity, this is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by so-called practice of yoga postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Yeah. So we don't have to quit our jobs or our studies or our other prescribed duties. Rather, we cultivate Krishna consciousness, remaining in our conditions, because we can only start where we are at the moment. We can't jump. So this is the conclusion that Srila Prabhupada talks about. Because in regards that, I just want to share a verse also. It's chapter 7, verse 11. Balam balvatam chaham kamaraga vivarjitam dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamo asmi bharat. Translation. I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire. I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles. O Lord of the Bharatas, Arjun. Purport. It's just a couple of lines purport. The strong man's strength should be applied to protect the weak, not for personal aggression. Similarly, Sex life, according to religious principles, dharma, should be for the propagation of children, not otherwise. The responsibility of parents is then to make their offspring Krishna conscious. Yeah. So this is the point here, that we do not stop our senses in order to control lust. Rather, we regulate them in Krishna consciousness, which is the solution of this biggest enemy of this world. It is a gradual process. It's not going to happen overnight. And if we understand this situation in this way, that we have this vaccination against the virus nowadays, that similarly, this Krishna conscious activities and reading Srila Prabhupada books, association with devotees, right devotees, and chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. All these activities are like vaccination against attack of lust, the eternal enemy of the world. The attack will happen for sure, but we will having this protection. So saying no is showing our strength. Actually, the person who can say no is powerful. So no to non-conducive environment. For example, even in material world, if you want to build the body, bodybuilders, or you want to perform good in the sports or any game, then you have to follow very strict discipline. And it's not like that you can eat any sort of junk or eat whatever you want and you will still build a body. So we still have to follow on material level. If you want to achieve something, we need to follow discipline and regulation. So we have to follow this process of regulation also, if you want to desire to control this lust. So similar way, our intelligence, I given this example, that is a gross body, building a body or sports. Our intelligence is also still material, but it's subtle. It's very subtle. So that also, if we need to build it means we need to, in a positive way, spiritualize it. Then we have to regulate. We have to do the right association to build it. And this is require very sincere and honest approach, because this is not a joke, or this is not a very easily done, or very cheaply. Rather, we shouldn't take it very cheaply, otherwise it's not going to happen and will be illusion. So this is the conclusion for these verses, that if we strengthen our intelligence, and then the and spiritualize our intelligence with Krishna conscious activities, then we'll be able to curb this lust, or turn this lust into love of God. Hare Krishna. So this is the conclusion. Thank you very much. If you got any questions or any comments, please share that.
Yes, Hare Krishna Sanjeev Prabhu. Very nice. It was good class.
Thank you, brother.
Bhagavad Gita references. Probably all of them on last you given.
Yes, it's quite a few probably. Yes.
Yes.
This is our biggest enemy.
Yes, the biggest enemy. Krishna knows, and he wants us to go back to him. So he has to tell us who's the biggest enemy, And we think our biggest enemy is across the border,
Yes.
Very nice. And also, I like the way you took the example of coronavirus and the vaccinations. These are all vaccinations where we protect ourselves. It's
Yes.
wonderful.
Thank
Very
you.
nice. Very nice. Okay, anyone has any questions or realizations, please feel free. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I had one question that, like So since I've only come 2 years ago, so like the people around you, they have a certain perception of you, right? Always. So like now that I'm trying to follow these regulative principles, these perceptions that people have of me, they're getting really disrupted. And like there are people that I care about, right? I was asking the same question to Avash Prabhu as well. That, so how do you deal with this when people close to you, their like their activities or their perceptions are getting disrupted because of your regulative principles. Like just to give a small example, that when I was in my first semester before I was in Krishna consciousness, a friend of mine got me these brownies and they were really nice. So I really liked them and I ate them at that time. So now when I've come back here college after 3 years, so out of compassion or out of whatever, she brought those brownies to me and she told me that, I remember that you liked these back then. So here, and I had to tell her that, I can't eat chocolate, but I took these brownies. I was like, thank you so much. Because, like she got a little upset. So like not that anything happened, but just like this is a small example about how, like all these things keep changing. So how do we deal with that?
Thank you, Mataji, for your question. And actually, this is a quite practical question. But if we carefully analyze the situation, if we have like near and dear ones, and and we following some regulative principles, and they're getting disturbed because of that. But if they are really are your well-wishers, or they are really close to you, they will understand that, okay, you're not doing the bad things, okay? Because nowadays you will see that people are drinking, smoking, and all those bad habits. So these regulative principles is not those bad habits anyway. And everybody can see that. But again, out of affection, if they brought something and you're saying that no. So I think after some time they will understand, okay, this is the way they're following it. So that's my understanding, that if you are firm on your regulative principles, then others will understand that after some times, not straight away, but after some times. And it's good that if we are strictly following it, then even you will generate the respect also from others, because they will see you as following sincerely, and after some time they will see that you're still following it, you're not deviating, so they will respect you also for that. So but Amrish Prabhu can elaborate more on uh, this point, if yeah, I haven't covered definitely everything.
Yes, thank you. No, you did very nice. You covered it. That's very good. Important thing which you said is that if they love you, then they will understand you. And the second thing which you said very nicely was that if you if they see you following very strictly, then over a period of time they will change.
Hmm.
I had a tough time. I am having a tough time about this with my relatives. Don't go too far away. I can say it straight up. And I
Yes.
think when I see all of you people, you're better off than me. Um, if you can just do one more thing, if you apart from this what you said is quite comprehensive answer. Don't fight with them. They are your elders. If they feel upset, you just smile. They'll be very confused. Somehow or other, just put a smile and just continue with your things. Why do you do like this? Just smile and do your things. Why not answering the question? Just smile and do your things. Just give yourself food to eat. Just worry about it. Just don't respond. Just smile. But you pray to Krishna. That thing you must do. Constantly help Krishna pray. Because Krishna is in the heart of yours, is in the heart of your relatives also, and your friends, whoever they are. And when he wants, he can change. But you don't have to change them. Especially when we are younger and they have seen us from childhood. Then if they've taken care of us since childhood, don't give none. Don't show your gnaniness to them. Like when I remember so many moons ago when I was in India. So this was our patent dialogue. When we would when a boss would say something, to the subordinate. "Whoa, ah!" And the subordinate gives some answer, very clever. So you're giving me gnan or something, you're giving me gyan. Huh? So with parents, with grandparents, with near and dear ones, just smile. Be firm, just smile. They'll get used to smiling and they'll know what is she doing. She's not doing something. That's the only thing. Otherwise, everything is nicely covered by him. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Sorry, just to add on to Divyanshi Mataji's question. She was asking about like a friend, right? So obviously with parents and elders, it's a different matter. But with people at your age, your peers, etc., if they ask you if they've developed a relationship with you, and then they see the change, it's obviously going to have different consequences and different implications as well. So yeah, what would you say is like a good way to deal with that? I can give you an example like of myself, for example. I found that I'm speaking to Divyanshi Mataji here. I found that actually like the more they get used to it. So at first it's a shock to that you're not doing this anymore, you're not doing that anymore. But then after a while, as you continue to meet them, they see that you haven't, even though your habits have changed, you as a person, your personality, everything about you, that correct, you've changed in terms of like your morals, your principles have changed, but you're still the same person. So those things become a bit like they a bit dispensable, although obviously some people may they may react differently to what, but if they're really, as Sanjeev mentioned, if they're your actual well wishers and if they do care about you as friends, then over a period of time, then they get used to it. That is what I've found. Obviously, there are people who try and challenge you on things and try and change your, say that why are you doing this, don't do this, etc. But I think you'll find that over a period of time, you'll see that people, they get used to it. So yeah, that was what I was thinking. If Sanjeev maybe has some other insights as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for your very good comment and answering. Yeah, I got the same because I'm not born like that. So I also used to have a friend circle that got all those activities that the people doing, And now because they are still in contact with me, and they've seen so many years that how I changed, but I'm still the same person as you said. I talk to them. Maybe one or two person is like that. He still try to bring the olden days, to the situation that you used to be like that, But again, then if they are really well wishers, then they stick around and they respect you also what you're doing, and they really they feel good about it. They're not like feeling any angry or any anger or jealousy or something like that. Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. That's what I was looking for. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Sanjeev Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you for your very elaborate discussion on lust, and it is very refreshing and very relevant example, as Amrish Prabhu said about COVID-19 and coronavirus. In this lust is subtle, coronavirus is not subtle, and coronavirus is very infectious. I think same with the lust also in modern world. because we are a herd mentality. Yeah, and it also spreads. Corona spreads so rapidly, and I think same thing in the lust means it's so easy to actually get influence and start feeling that this is how it is. This is how there's how many people actually will follow Srila Prabhupada, or even if they follow Srila Prabhupada, they understand Srila Prabhupada. So that's a very relevant example you picked up, and I was thinking, okay, coronavirus and COVID-19, and I wish it was same thing with the Krishna consciousness, the way it spread in last 18 months or 24 months. The whole world is completely changed. I think it's changed forever. I think same thing can happen if people can understand this little concept of Krishna consciousness. This is what Srila Prabhupada keep talking about, and this whole world will become a spiritual world. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for your comment. It's very very relevant. And
I've got a question. Sorry, I forgot to ask a question. So, coronavirus has got many variants now. Like at the moment we are fighting with Delta variant. Do lust have the variants?
lust is eternal, probably. So, thank you for question. Yes, lust got very, very different variants. As I said, that example of sex life is just one aspect of it. It's got different aspects. Putting yourself in center, getting identified with the bodily platform, and all these are different aspects of lust. Because lust is much deeper and much bigger than what we superficially think that this is lust. And I certainly haven't covered everything in these verses. There's a lot more references and more in the scriptures about lust. But the basic problem, or the basic origin of this lust is that when we are forgetting of our real identity and identifying with the matter, and that's where everything starts. So that's what I understood from these verses.
Perfect, Prabhu. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Very nice answer, Sanjeev Prabhu. Very good. It has got many variants, unlimited variants. Very, very good. This is your realization.
Yes,
test. Very good.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Very good. Actually, if you go to see, there are so many variants of lust. We think lust is only sex life. No. Bodily, as you correctly said in your class, bodily attachment is lust. You know, you may be sitting very nicely showing yourself to be sadhu, you know. And the moment somebody who's senior to you tells you of something, you immediately respond, become aggressive on this. So this is lust. Foolishness. And unless one can really controlling, one doesn't understand. Anger comes, from the point, attachment, anger, all this. One who does not really sit down and control his senses, you take it from me, they will always be agitated. Whether they are talking, they'll forget whether they're talking to their guru, Shiksha Guru, their father, mother, elder. This tendency comes out of it, a person. Artificially, you may sing nicely. The moment you say something, bang, you respond with it, This is the point. This is the test. And this can be controlled only by two ways. First is by chanting. Now we can see if somebody is chanting or not. And second thing is qualified chanting. When you study this Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and implement it and then chant, that is the difference. We can see that. You see, we can immediately see who's chanting, who's not chanting, and how they're chanting by this last spot. How somebody pokes and bang, they respond. They don't discriminate then. Yeah, good points. Very good points.
Yes, Prabhuji, because you were talking about on chanting, I also, I'm not chanting properly, Prabhuji. Means I'm struggling very hard. And I try to constantly purify my chanting. But still, it's look like a challenge, bro. It's challenge for every day. I don't know, means what's what's going on. But I think, as you rightly said, that is this is the only way to control the lust. Yeah. So the struggle is there, Prabhuji, for chanting, definitely.
Jai, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else have to say something? We can finish discussion today then.
Thank you, Sanjeev Prabhu, for your very nice class.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
And it's very good, actually, question and answer as well. So our thinking actually means you gave a very elaborate, actually, class on the lust. So actually, means I also think on the point that actually everything we have in us is actually always have origin in Krishna, you know. Everything is coming from Krishna. So actually I was listening to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada gave the example of this actually banyan tree, which is upside down. So how do you actually connect that to the Krishna, you know? Actually, is that a love that we have in spiritual world turns into lust?
Thank you, Sheetal Prabhu. I read that in purport of Srila Prabhupada, I think the second verse number 37. 37, yes. Srila Prabhupada also said that ultimately it's coming from Krishna, lust, and because everything comes from Krishna, but it's perverted here, you know. It's love of Godhead, but when it's in our spirit soul, but because we identify ourselves with matter, and then it becomes a lust, and that's why I think it's a perverted reflection of love of Godhead. Because we can't kill it, we can't just stop it, but we can regulate our life to transform it again, love of God. But that is very long, very sincere process. It's not going to happen straight away, because we are here for it, eternal time, you know. We have so much conditioning to clean. So I think it's, yeah, so this is the I read in Srila Prabhupada's purport. Prabhupada said that the lust is, because everything coming from Krishna is coming from Krishna also. But how to use it in the service of Krishna is we have to, I think we have to transform it to the love of God.
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah, I think that makes sense as well. And actually, yeah, Srila Prabhupada also actually on talking of that actually verse, you know, that banyan tree, the upside down.
Upside
Srila
down.
Prabhupada actually made a comment where he said, in this material world, we're upside down. And who will feel comfortable upside down? Huh? If you turn somebody upside down, is he going to feel comfortable? And it was such a simple realization, but actually I was thinking on that point at the time. Actually, I was preparing for this one of the warp session on that. And I thought about that point, and then that's why I realized that I might be wrong, that's why we have this uneasiness in this material world, you know. No matter what we do, always we are, you know, feel uneasy unless we are actually doing a spiritual thing. So I don't know, maybe it is actually, that's why, because we are doing the opposite things, you know, what we did in spiritual world. That's why it's always an uncomfortable feeling. So Prabhupada said we're never going to be comfortable in this material world. So
Yes.
yeah, might be the, you know, that's why we become so lusty, you know. In spiritual world, I think everybody's engrossed in love for Krishna, you know. Here we're actually maybe exhibiting the same thing, but in a perverted way.
Perverted, yeah. Yes, I think it's perverted. Yes, probably. Definitely it's perverted. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Well, Krishna is also called lusty. He's called lusty by the gopis. We don't go too much there on the subject matter, but because you raised the point, that comes from Krishna. So that is the point. But his lust is such, if I'm lusty, then no woman is going to come to me like loving me. The lust is not good. You see? But Krishna is lusty, everyone is attracted to him. That is the point. It's a little higher level of discussion. I'm a little shy to discuss this, this point. But yeah, he is accused of being lusty too. But that lust is, as you said correctly, it's a parota reflection. The banyan tree is upside down. Just like Parakya Bhav exists in the spiritual world in Golok Vrindavan. There's nothing wrong. But moral codes in the material world, when he comes and his Parakya Bhav is considered to be, because when you implement it, it becomes wrong. When you physically implement it, you see? Physical implementation is not there is nothing wrong in the spiritual world. Yeah. And the experience that you feel being in this material body, this material world, but the transcendence experience, but things don't affect you, the things are going past and it's not even affecting you. That experience has to be experienced. Wonderful.
Yes.
Very nice. Very nice. Hare Krishna. Okay. Anybody else wants to say anything before we come to today's discussion? We'll wait for a few seconds. Okay, thank you very much. We will now disconnect the link from YouTube channel right now, and we'll give a new link immediately in few seconds. So don't go away. Our next program starts now. Krishnadas, can you sing Jai Radha Madhava?